Hello, friends and neighbors. Welcome back to the studio class of Low Brass U. When life hands us lemons, we make beef stew. I can't remember if I've used that rhyme yet. I'm really running out of things that rhyme with the ooh sound, but I am your fearless co-host, Connor, and with us today on the tuba, nonetheless, is our fearless leader, Zach Marley.
Here I am. It took me a second to click buttons. I was clicking. No, it is a tuba. But I was clicking other buttons. That I need to click these buttons. So yes, I'm here, and we're both here actually. And we've got a fun little overlay that I won't use the entire time. I won't wear it out probably, because that's not in my character to wear out a joke or wear out something. No. But anyway, I just wanted to show this little thing that I got going on screen. So
that's pretty slick.
So if we have a discussion, we need to talk about a chord, we have that capability, which I will now turn off, so we don't have to see it again. But I might bring it back when more people are online, and it might tie into some other topics and things. But yes, we are live, and one thing that we'll cover right at the top of this show, just in case someone actually is watching this after the fact, then after this week, we'll be moving to Mondays for the foreseeable future. So same time, just on Mondays instead of Tuesdays. So 7:30 Central Time. So that's just kind of what it has to be for now, and hopefully that'll work out. We think it'll work out, but we'll see.
You think?
We'll see if it actually works out. It's always a little bit of a guess. So, but yes, we've got one person active in the chat. None of these are necessary. We'll throw up the yo on there. How about that? That's
sure. We'll give you a yo. Shout out a yo.
Just to test the comments, make sure they're working, and they are working, because technology always works. It never breaks. But yes, we're here today. How was your day, Connor? Did you have some teaching to do today?
Today went pretty well. Yeah, I had a lot of teaching to do. This is an exciting time in the semester for those of us who teach at all. And in the public school, at least out here in Washington, the month of January is the end of the semester. And so what's been exciting so far is just seeing the absolute onslaught of video content that I am being sent by my students now, who have had these assignments since August. And so I'm doing a lot of grading right now, which when you teach music online and you are testing for evidence of musical stuff, that stuff has to be recorded by every single student, which means that if you're the instructor of record, you got to watch all of those videos. So I've been getting very comfortable with my laptop, just slugging it through, doing that right now. So that's a real, that's the logistics of it all right now, but it's fun. It's cool stuff.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I made the mistake of doing a few too many recording things, and just for the end of the semester in December, and it's just like, oh, I didn't really think that this would catch up to me in this way, and it definitely did. But yes, we've got some good topics for today. Let's see, we got a question already. What's the loudest trombone there is in the world? Great starting question.
Man.
So what is the loudest trombone there is in the world? One thing that's important with that question is to know that the trombone is among the loudest instruments.
Yes, that's a acoustically proven fact.
Correct.
So, I will cite no sources for. I followed that up with nothing.
Yeah, I would have said it more definitively. I think it is more definitive than that. I just don't remember why that's true or where to go to look that information up. Or what the exact statement is. But what I would say to what's the loudest trombone in the world, I think a lot of it would have to do with, kind of bore size, and I think it can't have a valve. I think that's the starting point. I think
So you're saying that the loudest trombone cannot have a valve?
I don't think so. I think that is inconvenient in just directionality of your air. You know what I'm saying?
I get it. So you're thinking like a trombone making its loudest potential sound is probably on the straight side of the horn.
And
you're telling me.
I think it's straight, and then I think I don't think it can be the biggest thing. Like, I don't think a straight bass trombone is the move.
I see.
So yeah, I think something, I feel like just like a 2B or 3B sort of style instrument, like something like that is probably just what we're looking for as far as just the loudest instrument.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the most paint peeling that I've done where I've had like people look visibly frustrated at me is when I have a smaller horn.
Yeah,
and I'm doing something zippy.
I think part of that too is perception versus reality, because we perceive loudness not necessarily always based off pure decibel level, which is, the simple scientific measurement of sound. I think we also hear it a little bit by, how many, the middle frequencies. I think that's a lot of it too.
Definitely.
So I think that sometimes with those small bores, you get that kind of more cutting sound because it's more mid forward, and just that's kind of the focal point of that. So, which is kind of an interesting. I thought about making a video. I was thinking about it yesterday, actually, about the real difference between a small bore and a large bore, because I think that there's so much that's not accurate or not quite accurate that's said about small bore versus large bore, or when someone says, well, a professional instrument has a valve and it's a large bore. Like statements like that I don't totally agree with. I mean, I assume you don't either. But I think that it's important to know where they succeed and where they not fail, but what the limitations might be for each instrument. And I think the thing that I like to think about with large bores versus small bores in the regard of tenor trombone is that you can get away with playing louder on a large bore.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because it's a little less aggressive, a little less in your face, a little, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say pleasant, but it's just not quite as cutting.
Right.
So we got a couple other comments and questions in here. What are some good bass trombone tips?
Be careful.
Yeah.
That's my bass trombone. Watch out.
Bass trombone's an interesting thing. I think one thing that I see a lot of younger players do that I don't always love is just focusing on trying to be a tuba right away. It's just like everything's down the octave. You're playing all the tuba parts in marching band. Everything is low. There's hardly anything in the staff. There's nothing above the staff. And I like to think of bass trombone as really almost encompassing all of tenor trombone plus more.
Mm-hmm.
It really shouldn't be that you can't play high and that you can't do all those things. So I just kind of think that when you're doing routine-like things, I still keep it mostly with the tenor trombones, but then some things go down the octave. I think you have to, I guess my best tip is do everything that all your tenor trombone players are doing, or your tenor trombone playing friends are doing, and then on top of that, you need to do not quite what the tubas are doing, but lower things in general.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other thoughts about that, Connor?
No, definitely. I would say if you're coming from playing the tenor trombone, approach it from an area where you have familiarity. Will probably give you the most transferable skills. That being said, there's a really good argument made for jump in the deep water and just exist as a bass trombone player. So yeah, I think you hit it on the nail. I was kind of half listening to that response. I'm looking up audiology facts about.
Yeah, I could see your eyes moving.
Yeah, so
apparently I wasn't that engaging. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you were engaging. So first rabbit hole I went down came to a non-answer that I didn't like. I was trying to figure out what was the loudest acoustic instrument. And the first result I got was not an acoustic instrument, but technically the loudest and largest instrument in the world specifically like this instrument is the Boardwalk Hall Auditorium organ in Atlantic City, New Jersey. That is the largest and loudest instrument, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. The other thing I found was it didn't tell me specifically which instrument was like the loudest, but there was a study of 143 professional French horn players, and they were studying like how loud was the horn getting and the amount of noise-induced hearing loss. Apparently, French horn, maybe because of the way it's shaped, really lends itself to a lot of damage, but that's something to definitely consider, you know, when we're talking about what's the loudest trombones. Like, they're all super loud, and playing in an ensemble, especially if you're going to do it long term, definitely consider some hearing health and get yourself some nice plugs.
Yeah, all that stuff with hearing health is so tricky and so complicated. I never quite know what the best recommendation is, and I'm probably just doing damage to my own ears. I try to be good about it, but I think with the work that I'm currently doing, at some level, you just have to accept that you're losing some hearing, which is not great, but, you know, kind of is what it is.
Well, would the monitors that you use be like insulating to the actual exterior sound? I feel like whenever I've played with in-ears like this, it's definitely like, you know, if I don't have the right things turned up in my ears, then I don't hear it at all.
Yeah, I think part of it is maybe that I don't have nice enough in-ears and that they're not sealing quite as well. I've definitely thought about getting some custom molded ones, and I've custom molded earplugs, but the problem that I always had with those is, you know, this is somewhat sciencey, but potentially somewhat inaccurate. I feel like my ear canal or ear area changes shape as my jaw maybe is moving while I'm playing. And so they would like fall out over time. And like, I kind of just feel, I'm sure that someone has had better success with this than I have, but I kind of feel that it's impossible to get them to fill up that whole space, but also allow you to play well without, you know, with some movement. But maybe maybe that's wrong. Maybe I need to investigate that again.
I'm not sure.
But I definitely do use pretty much the cheapest in-ears, which is evident by me using these headphones today, because my other in-ears they work, but they are struggling a little bit right now. The ones that I usually use on stream. I've got a pretty annoying hiss to them at the moment.
Oh boy.
So I'll probably due for another order of those or something else. Mr. Soberman says, my favorite trombonist is the bald guy from the New York Phil. I think that can only be one person. As far as I can think of, I think everybody else has a pretty good head of hair.
Well, I mean, maybe in the trombone section, but there could be other people who play the trombone that are also bald that are in the New York Phil. So I don't think it gives us enough information.
Well, the main members of the New York Phil, everybody else has hair.
All right. I'm just saying, like, globally, there could be like a second violinist who happens to be bald who also plays the trombone for fun. And maybe this person, Mr. Soberman, really likes that person's playing.
Fair enough. I think Mr. Soberman is talking about Joe Alessi.
Yeah, I think so too. But it's a funny thought.
And then Life of a Band Kid says, I like Wyclef Gordon. Both of them are great, and I think that there's actually a video that potentially both of you have seen or others have seen. But there's a video of the two of them playing the Malcolm Arnold Fantasy back to back. It's, you know that video, Connor? It's like an old school YouTube.
That's old YouTube video. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's like we just started with YouTube as a society. I feel like maybe it's not quite that old, but it feels pretty old. 14 years ago, I feel pretty good about that being...
That's old YouTube.
That's pretty old. So let me mute this, and then I can show it on screen. There we go. So I won't play it, but that's Joseph Alessi playing 14 years ago. But yeah, so in that same recital masterclass thing, Wyclef Gordon also played it, but, you know, did some improvisation around it. So yeah, that's definitely like one of those just original YouTube things. I was talking, I taught a lesson today, and We were talking about, good resources, tuba players on YouTube to check out, and also Happy New Year.
Yeah.
We were talking about just, good tuba players who happen to be on YouTube was kind of the way that we were looking at things. And, the one that always comes up is kind of, to me, one of the original, amazing tuba players on YouTube is Oystein Bodsvik. Because he was on about the same time. I found a video that was 14 years ago also. Just thinking about, 2007? I feel like, we must have known that YouTube exists in 2007, but that it feels like I didn't know about it for like a couple of years later.
Right.
Like I definitely remember early days of YouTube, like in my band director's office, there were some really old, like Macintosh computers. I think they're Macintosh, maybe they're Windows. I don't, they're old computer, like older than the rest of the school that like nobody used. And like they probably just should have been removed at this point, but that's where I would like watch these sorts of videos when I'd be like staying after school. The computers definitely weren't current even to the time.
No.
But yes, so yeah, there's some really great videos from that time period. There aren't a ton, and they probably don't hold up as far as video and audio quality at this point in time. But some of them are. It's a nice relic, at least for us, medium old folk. I don't know what category we should be in. We're not really.
That's a new term. Medium old.
Compared to what I believe to be most of the people who are watching this, were probably older, but potentially
probably.
Not.
Yes.
But yeah, so those sorts of early on things were always, really interesting. But yeah, so Connor, we kind of texted a little bit about this, but I thought it would be fun to kind of, remove the curtain of one of our conversations that we had this week, and talking about some used bass trombone options.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that, I think instruments are expensive, at least to my financial vantage point. Instruments are expensive.
Prohibitively expensive.
I don't look at a $6,000 bass trombone and think, that's really cheap. That's not a big deal to me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've got that in my wallet right now. Let's go. No one's saying this.
Money is, well, not no one. It's
sure.
important to remember that money is relative. And it's not that a $6,000 bass drum couldn't be purchased, and I'm thinking about purchasing one this summer. But, the point of it is it's not just like a, just go out and buy it. That's not like a typical Christmas present or something like that. No. So we were looking at, we send each other used instrument prices from time to time, somewhat just to stay on top of things and also to maybe be talked off the ledge a little bit. Mostly Connor telling me not to play or not to buy certain things,
yes.
Which he does a great job of. But anyway, we found an Edwards that was, what was it, $3,200 or something? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important thing to realize with looking at used instruments is you can find some pretty good deals that are half price sometimes of what they go for new. And if you know what to look for, you can get a really good instrument. I often get asked, how did I afford all of these instruments? And the biggest part of it is that very few of my instruments are new. Mm-hmm. Of the low brass instruments in my office, of the two tubas, neither of those were new, and they were at pretty good deals. My euphonium, the cheaper one was new, the more expensive one was not. My bass trombone was used. The large tenors were new. All of the small tenors, medium bore, all of those are used, and the alto was new. So at the end of the day, I think that's a really good strategy for getting instruments and there are lots of great resources, and you have to be somewhat trusting of the world, which every time I've done it I felt really uncomfortable. I will admit that. Yeah. Just like, here's this check, and I usually like to try to do it, check into the person. It's really nice when you know someone or like or when you know someone who knows someone. And a perfect example is I bought some mouthpieces a while ago, and the person I bought it from I didn't know, but they had mutual friends of people that I did know, and I knew that based off of the area that they probably actually do know each other. And he didn't send me the mouthpieces in a timely manner. I messaged him again, and everything was fine. He just kind of forgot. But it's like those sorts of things. It makes you uncomfortable, certainly. We got this question. My private lesson teacher wants me to play this tuba solo, and it goes pretty high above the staff. And I can play it, but it sounds close. So any advice to make it sound more open? Do you want to start with that, Connor? Even I know it's a tuba question, but it's more of a general. It's a general question.
It's a brass question. It sounds like maybe some of the parts of this upper register, these notes in the tuba part, are kind of entering an area of discomfort for you, or it might be what like I call it kind of like the squeak zone. It's like I have a zone of the trombone that I'm very, very comfortable in. And then every time that I go to work, especially like when I was like in early college, when I was really building a lot of range that I probably should have already had, it started off, it was always kind of an evolution. It was like, first the note's not there. I'm touching the ceiling every day with my routine. And then when a new note would manifest in my range, the first time that I heard it, it was never a gigantic, huge, beautiful sound. It was little mouse squeaks. And once I got that squeak, I squeaked it as often as I could. And gradually you fill it up until you have, congratulations, a new note in your comfortable range. And by the time that note is loud and resonant and comfortable, it's not like the new squeaky note's not there yet. It's probably already there. It's like this very slow, gradual process. And so I think we've said similar things here before. It's like if you don't go into your attic every single day, you're not going to know where any of your stuff is up there. And if you don't go and check the high register every day on your tuba, you're not going to know where the notes are. And so that means that this note is a future resonant note. It just means you're probably, the fact that you can squeak it and it sounds small now means you're already on the right track. And so I would say keep at it and play it often.
Yeah, I think that all of that is definitely kind of, we're definitely on the same page with that. And that, yeah, it may not sound perfect today, may not sound perfect tomorrow, but progress is the most important thing. And sometimes it's hard to see your own progress with stuff like that. But, I had a somewhat similar example with a student who was playing a piece for their jury last semester it was really low for them. It went down to this note. Hey, we can actually put it on the screen. This is the perfect use.
Show us the note.
So that note, the lowest C on the piano. So I don't know how many ledger lines it is. I just have some sort of visual recognition for it at this point. But it went down to that note. And at first it sounded, I hope my student's not listening, but it sounded bad. And then it sounded a little bit better. And it never quite got to the point of it sounding great. But I bet if he stuck with it over winter break, which maybe he did, maybe he didn't, I bet that it sounds almost pretty solid now, and we're definitely going to work on it, next week or so when he starts having lessons again. We're going to work on that range, and I bet by the end of this semester, it's going to be pretty solid. That sounds frustrating because it's, we started working on it in maybe September or October, and I'm thinking that it's going to sound good maybe by May. Mm-hmm. And I could imagine that that's not what we want to hear, but that's sometimes how it goes, and unfortunately, it just takes some time to develop those sorts of things. There is a lot of, physical things that are going on. You can talk about some of those things, but in my experience, you never really need to know those things. You just need to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And it takes repetition. And I would say if it's not hurting and you're doing it in a way that's not being, not unhelpful to your overall playing, I think that it's something that you just have to spend some time doing. But what I like to do to practice that sort of stuff is both scales and arpeggios. So what I'll do is something like play, take whatever major scale that it doesn't really matter what scale, but I always think about a scale that it takes zero brain power to play, which should be all of them for all of us. but probably isn't. So take your B flat major scale or something and start in a very reasonable range, and then go up an octave. If that's easy, go up, keep adding a note, or, kind of start where you're comfortable. So that might be 2 octaves, and then 2 octaves plus a note, 2 octaves plus 2 notes, 2 octaves plus 3 notes, that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of one of my thinking, is that I want to expand my middle range, because if everything is in my middle range, everything's easy. I always ask the question of, is high range hard? And then the usual answer is, yeah, it's kind of hard. Is low range hard? Yeah, it's kind of hard. What about mid range? Mid range is easy. So if we take the idea of, our mid range being on tuba, instead of it just being maybe from here to here, if we can think about it being from here to here, or here to here, something like that, then it starts to be, where all of it's kind of easy. So I kind of think about it from an expansion point of view. So I'm not sure if this equipment manager question is for us, but we'll answer it anyway. I'm in Texas, and Connor, do you want to give your general location? I won't force you to.
Yeah, I'll dox myself. I'm in Washington.
I think you actually have already said it on stream today.
Yeah,
anyway.
I did, didn't I? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay then.
So Connor, I've got a funny story that I was gonna post on the internet, but then I felt kind of silly, so I didn't do it. But
you're safe here.
I think that this is a safe enough space. So I have multiple mouthpieces, as you know.
I know all about your mouthpieces, Zach.
I've got a few mouthpieces. I have some mouthpieces that look the same.
You're saying duplicate mouthpieces?
Looking, not. I mean, I do have a couple duplicates, but I have some that look the same if you're not careful.
But they're not the same size.
So do you want to know what I did for about a day and a half without knowing?
What'd you do?
I played a bass mouthpiece on tenor trombone, and not a small bass mouthpiece. And I was just like, man, I took a couple days off on winter break, and it's just like, that was so foolish. I'm never doing that again. Everything is so hard. I was just trying to play scales, and
all right.
And it's like, I could play it, but it was just like, man, and because what I thought it was. I thought it was like that 3G with size mouthpiece with a modified throat, the Hammond, but it was the Hammond bass that I have that is like a 1.5 or 1.25 G size, and so it's just like, man, I just that's right, 3G size, that's just not for me on tenor trombone. I don't get it. This is just terrible for no reason, and turns out it was a bass mouthpiece, and it's just just such a facepalm moment of just when I realized it, because I went to play bass trombone and I was looking for that mouthpiece, and I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't see it here. And I just cleaned my office. My office has never been cleaner. Since having this configuration, or somewhat of this configuration of stuff, it's really pretty clean. Not to, it's almost never this clean. And so it's just I should know where all my mouthpieces are, because they should be either in an instrument, in a case, or in the mouthpiece rack. And I was just so frustrated, because I was like, where is it? And then I realized it's in a tenor trombone.
Oh no. That's nothing more discouraging than, just being engulfed by a mouthpiece that's way too huge for the job you're trying to do, and you played yourself. I don't think I've ever done it to that extreme before. No, I've never done that. Put a bass trombone mouthpiece inside of a tenor trombone. The closest I've done is just simply bring the wrong horn to a gig.
I've done that before.
Visually, it's very apparent, and so you can emotionally prepare for it. But it's a different animal. I really don't want to buy a bunch of cases, especially because most of my instruments are out at all times. The only brass instrument in this household that is not in my office set up with a mouthpiece in it at this very moment is a student model trombone, which is in my storage area. Everything else, literally, even I've got a little high brass corner now. It's a sneaky thing behind my trombone sound panel. And so I've got a trumpet, a cornet, and a slide trumpet or soprano trombone.
Why do I have those out? I don't have a good reason, but I have wall mounts for them now. So they're all mounted on the wall, and I can grab them any moment. I've recorded many cornet videos this week, and none of them were good enough to post because I don't sound that good. So, but maybe sometime soon I'll get a cornet video. I was trying to play Lament, the J.J. Johnson tune on cornet. And
it's got some range.
It does have some range. Like even on trombone, sometimes it's just like, well, I don't need to play this part up there, So yeah, it's definitely just it's a rangy tune. But I'm getting some dexterity back, and I don't know, trumpet/cornet is fun. It's a little bit silly, and I don't really need to work on it, but it's just kind of fun.
It's fun to do bad things every now and then.
Yeah.
You're allowed to play instruments for fun.
Yeah. I'm in Texas too, so hope you're still teaching in a few years so I can attend the college you work at. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I would be happy to have you at Tarleton State University if that comes if that works for you at that time. So I don't know how far away that is. Maybe that's 5 years. Maybe it's next year. But yes. And then I'm not sure. Oh, we're talking about the mouthpiece things probably. This is how you learn trombone, starting on tuba with a Schilke 60, which is the largest bass trombone mouthpiece they make. I still don't have that one. That's one of those mouthpieces that I have no desire to play. At least I've never played one and said, this is it. This is for me. But it's one of those mouthpieces that I just like have to have in the collection at some point. So
yes.
it's one of those I just like hope to see like online for like $20 and just like used and just be like, sure, I'll buy it.
I feel like educationally, it's just good to have that reference of like, this is the biggest bass trombone mouthpiece that money can buy for a Schilke.
Well, for Schilke.
For Schilke, clarifying.
Right.
And so if you were like someone who was like, oh, I'm in the wheelhouse of Schilke bass trombone mouthpieces, and I think mine's the right fit, but I'm just really not sure. It's like, well, we could come from it from two ways. Like maybe we could try a few mouthpieces like going larger, or we could go from a 60 and go smaller and see what feels different, what feels good, what feels bad.
Right.
Or more importantly, what sounds good, what sounds different, what sounds bad.
Yeah, definitely. And I just feel like between Dennis Wick, Bach, and Schilke, those three brands to me are so much of the naming scheme and just size and just general things of like how other companies kind of operate, because those are just like three long-standing mouthpiece manufacturers. So in my perfect world, I'd have all of the things from all of those brands at some point. But that's a lot of money in mouthpieces that I don't intend on playing. But I think it'd be a good tool to have. I mean, I bought a Schilke 59 not that long ago, and that was kind of one that was in that category, because I sometimes recommend that one, and I have a lot of students, like almost all of my students at Tarleton, not because of me necessarily. I'm not sure if there's a reason, but a lot of them are playing Schilke mouthpieces, and so, they had Schilke, some of the bass trombone players, or one of them had a Schilke 59. And so I kind of just wanted to get one and mess around on it. I don't think that I've been convinced to switch to it. But I think it's, again, just a good one to have. So I believe the slide trumpet is a Baroque instrument. Do you want to take that one, Connor? I have some thoughts, but I don't know if you have more certain ideas.
I don't know specifically about slide trumpet and specifically Baroque music. I mean, maybe we're referring to like the idea of like a natural trumpet. Would that be closer? And would that be in the Baroque era?
Yeah. So I don't think that they had slide trumpets. I think that they like the sackbut, which is, the Baroque trombone, or, kind of from that period is what we're talking about. I don't know that they got that small. I think that alto was the smallest.
What's the name of the trumpet where it's like, it looks like a herald trumpet, but there's like actual like holes that have been drilled into
That's
the
a
top
natural
of it?
trumpet.
That's a natural trumpet?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact timeline of that. But yeah, there are definitely some instruments along that sort of time period. There's the keyed bugle also, which I think came a little bit later than that. I suppose we can pull up
Keyed
some.
bugle is in like crook bugle, like where you're taking the thing out and you're changing it.
No.
Oh, it's a different thing.
Let's see here. I need to have the ability to switch quickly to these different things, which I will make that happen at some point. There we go. So of course you can't see it. I will also make it where you're going to be able to see things at some point, Connor. But yeah, so here are some keyed bugles, but I think that those are a little bit later, not really in the Baroque era. But I think the natural trumpet is the Baroque era instrument for the most part for the higher stuff.
I see.
Yeah, so with a trigger, it was essentially a trumpet with a trigger that extended the tuning slide towards the face. I'm not really sure what that means. Do you know what that means?
I'm not sure. I mean, like modern trumpets have a trigger that makes the third valve kick towards your face, but it might be a different thing they're referring to. I'll have to look that up.
But anyway, yeah, natural trumpet. I guess I could pull up a picture of a natural trumpet also. Oh, almost had it. I'm glad no one saw what it actually pulled up. Here we go. Nope. There we go. So these are some natural trumpet pictures. But yeah, I think that these are all from the Baroque era. Yeah, introducing the Baroque trumpet, the natural trumpet. But yeah, I don't think that they really had a sack butt that was that small. But again, I could be wrong. I'm definitely not a Baroque expert. I know a few things, but that's definitely a little bit out of my knowledge base.
Yeah.
But yeah, those period instruments are really, really kind of interesting to look at and things. And that's definitely, I'm kind of, pre-planning that as like a good midlife crisis for me, is that I'll get into the ophicleide and the serpent and all of those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But one thing that is kind of interesting with the serpent is that people are 3D printing them now.
They're 3D printing serpents specifically?
Yeah.
Why did the serpent get the pick?
I think just because it's simple, and I don't know what they were originally made of. I think that they kind of developed from instruments that were made from like animal horns, but I think that themselves were made out of wood, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But they could easily be made out of plastic. And so people are just 3D printing the little smaller sections and assembling it, which is kind of interesting. So maybe at some point I would do that before getting a real one. Not saying that's not real, but yeah, I'd like to do some period instrument stuff. I mean, sackbut stuff is kind of fun, but that's to get really quality instruments for those sorts of things are really expensive. And it is possible to make money with those.
You're not going into playing that for money. This is an art with a capital A.
Yeah,
venture.
There are Baroque groups and they're really cool. The amount of people who are able to make a living off of playing Baroque instruments is not a ton. But it's one of those things where it's just like it's another tool in the stable that I'd like to have at some point. But we're definitely not there yet. We've got some other things to purchase that have more value in the real world. But yes, it's period instruments are fun. They're just a little bit silly. Because especially with the sackbuts, have you spent any time playing sackbut, Connor?
I have never played a sackbut before. I'm ashamed to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's no shame.
But it's so cool. I feel like it's like such a part of like, I feel like there were opportunities where I probably could have tried it, especially like while I was living in Texas. I could have gotten my hands on one at some point, or gotten in the room with somebody who knew how to access one or hear them more. I think
Yeah.
it's very interesting stuff. It's just it kind of I was too busy with other stuff.
I never like played one in a performance at UNT, um, but I had like some friend access to some, and I remember the bass trombone, which I believe was an F. That one had a mouthpiece that was like smaller than most small bore tenor mouthpieces. Like everything is just so much smaller. So yeah. So let's see. Could you make a recording of the 6 Studies of English Folk Song for tuba? I could. I am capable of doing that. It's a great piece. I really like that piece. I had no, I didn't have a student play it this past semester, but it's a great piece, and I don't have any current plans. I'd love to do more tuba with piano, or brass instruments with piano for this channel, but it's the way that I want to do it. Really kind of just like it requires to have like a place with a grand piano that I have permanent access to, because I just have like all these little video things and things that I'm concerned with that I'd like to like to do. So have you ever played a tuba with more than 4 valves?
That's a great question.
I have. Let's see.
That's topical. We've been talking. This is like get a valve shot.
So you maybe only see 4. Maybe if I turn it, you can kind of see the 5th valve. I don't know how to hold this. It's pretty big and heavy. But there's a 5th thumb valve. Is that in the shot? Yeah.
Yes, it is. Now that you're moving it, it's more easy. Like it was in the shot and it was clear, but it was hard to tell like what was the 5th valve.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So both my tubas are set up this way. 4 valves, all in the right hand, which is what most people in America prefer. So I would say that for C tubas and especially for F tubas, you have to have 5 valves. It's really hard to play a 4 valve F tuba. For E flat tuba, there's compensating stuff that gets in the way, but if it's non-compensating, again, I think you need 5 valves. And for C tuba, I really prefer it for a serious student, I wouldn't recommend a 4-valve C tuba unless they were going to have another C tuba. Like I'll probably own a 4-valve C tuba at some point, because in general, the fewer valves, the better, because it's less twists and turns. So there are some really great playing 4-valve instruments. That being said, it comes at the inconvenience of not having the 5th valve at times when you need it. Both my tubas, I only have 2. One day that number will go up. But both of them have 5 valves. They're even 6-valve tubas. Usually F tubas are not. Well, most F tubas don't have 6 valves. But if you do see a 6-valve tuba, it's almost certainly an F tuba. That's the only kind of tuba that's made like off of a factory line that is 6 valves at this point. I think that's. The more than 4 valves is what most professionals play on most of the time. But the amount of times that you use your 5th valve is still not that high. But it's one of those things it's better to have and not need than to need and not have. And you could argue that you never need it, and that's mostly true. The only note that you're going to have trouble with just 4 valves, or maybe that's not entirely true, but the biggest problem is the note above the fundamental. So if you're playing a B flat tuba, that low B natural isn't really possible. On C tuba, that low D flat isn't really possible. Just a half step above your lowest open note. So that can get to be an issue. But there are also times where it is very helpful even before that note. You have to use kind of not so great fingering sometimes, or a lot of slide pulling, which sometimes you can manage, sometimes you can't. There are a lot of concerns like that. So I prefer playing with 5 valves, as since I only have 1 tuba in each key that I currently play. For B flat tuba, I probably will buy a B flat tuba at some point. I don't know that it'll have a 5th valve. That would be dependent on cost, and I'd probably hopefully getting one at a deal. So it's like, if it has it, great. If not, I don't really care.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you just talked about when you have 5 valves, you like that better because you don't have to do as much valve pulling. Is that what you said?
Slide pulling?
Or
Yeah.
slide pulling. Yeah.
You still have to do slide pulling, or you still,
Okay, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, so you know this from playing a non-compensating 4-valve euphonium. And you don't have the luxury, because your top action, you don't really have the luxury of pulling the slides down here, which is, an inherent issue with the euphonium. But there are times in the low range where you probably would want to.
Yes.
Like thinking about your fingering for low F.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably doing it, 1, 2, 4?
Wait.
Or sorry, low
F?
low E flat, sorry. I was thinking,
yeah. It's right in between those two. It's like you can lip it down or lip it up.
Right, and if you had a tuba or a euphonium that had a first valve slide up here, you could just pull that. So little things like
4 and 1 with a pull.
That's an option. It may still not be the best option,
right.
But you have options like that, and you can shrink the horn, or you can shorten the horn, or you can lengthen the horn depending on your slide configuration. And sometimes that saves the day. Sometimes, they're just fingerings. We're talking about it going kind of chromatically down on a 4-valve B flat or B flat tuba or B flat euphonium. F, E, even that's not quite enough tubing, but we just don't worry about it.
No one really talks about it.
And then 1, 2, 4 probably, or lipping down 1, 4, but we might have to lip up 1, 2, 4, and then we can also have our own issues. And then, so for the D, 2, 3, 4, and that's what I think most people do for that note, regardless if they have a 5th valve. And then for the next note, it's sometimes it's just all 4, and then the next note's all 4 too, and then the next one's all 4. It's like,
right. That's my question, is like when you get down, because like when I had the 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4 all down was the closest facsimile to a low C that I had. So for most 4-valve euphoniums or I guess it would be tubas that have the luxury of doing a pull, is it possible on a 4-valve tuba to get a in-tune low B natural with like 4 and a pull?
It's a 4 and a pull. you know, which is why I say that it's possible to make it work, because like
in flight, that's a lot to do.
Yeah, in isolation, you can get that note to come out. Also, that's one of those notes like that doesn't come up very often. And honestly, most of the time when I play that note, it's on F tuba, because it's in solo literature where the range is just drastically expanded. So there are lots of, kind of tricky things about that to kind of deal with having only 4 valves. But even then, even with tuba, it's like you don't play in that range every day. It's really not that important. Like I wouldn't worry about showing up to a random gig with a 4-valve tuba. That doesn't scare me. Like I have no worry whatsoever about like showing up to a random, brass quintet thing or whatever. The likelihood that I have to play that note is slim, and everything else you can kind of deal with. But even those deal with notes, most of those you don't use those either. Like you don't have to play those notes. The first note where I really like to have the 5th valve is a 4th below the or the second overtone. So if we're on, a 5th below. So like that E flat going 5, 4 is really great, assuming the standard thing, which will segue into this. We'll go back to some other questions, but this is relevant now. So how much does the 5th valve lower the pitch by? So this is a question that you get a lot, and I want to just throw this out there that anything can be made with a blowtorch and a dream with the brass instrument. Anyone can solder something together in their garage. So there are standards, but in the real world, you can find other things. And with the 5th valve, there are basically 2 standards. Most modern instruments, especially the ones that you see in the United States, have a 5th valve that we generally call a flat whole step. And so what that kind of means is it's slightly longer than your first valve. So it's not really to the point where it's, a step and a half, but it's maybe a step and a quarter. And that's assuming that you're not pushing anything else down. So what that's really handy for, talking about this low E flat idea on a euphonium or a tuba, 1, 2, 4 is too much tubing. 1, 4 isn't enough tubing. Goldilocks, 5, 5, and 4 is usually pretty much a perfect, perfect fingering for that. But there is a longer version of that where to play that low E flat on a B flat instrument, it's actually 5, 2, 3. So the fifth valve is longer. And that one's not super common. And I have two students. I had 2 students last semester with that fingering or that fifth valve thing, which you kind of find on older Mirophones. It's kind of the most commonplace. And even for me, it's like I've taught people with that fingering system before, but I have to like do some math. It's like I've got like the numbers, flowing by me, thinking it's like, okay, here's your fingering, because they're looking at me like, hey, what's my fingering for this note? And it's just like, don't say anything for a second.
Right.
There you go. Like, I don't have those down from memory. Again, that's another like pedagogical tool that I'd like to have at some point. And there are some advantages of that. And one that you might find interesting, Connor, is that what note do you think that makes all 5 down?
Wait. All 5
with that
thingies.
Longer fifth valve. Because before that note is a half step above the fundamental.
This is a half step above the fundamental?
All 5.
All 5. But when it's longer, you're asking me what the note would be? It's not the fundamental.
Yeah, I mean, we could argue that it's not technically the fundamental, but it's the
fundamental.
It usually is pretty well in tune most of the time.
Oh,
so that adds another fingering for that, which can be really handy for certain things. Thinking about like the Vaughan Williams tuba concerto, on a standard 5-valve F tuba, you have an F to G flat. Like that is a thing you have to do.
Oh, we've talked about this before.
We've talked about it with a 6-valve as being a solution, but this longer 5th valve is also a solution.
So all 5 on an F tuba, that's your F. And then this is your G flat?
If you have a longer one, no.
If you have a long one.
So it would be, again, I'd have to think about it, but I think it would be 5, 3, 4 for the G flat.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Which on my F tuba, the only way to do that is ba, ba. And it's like,
right.
You work on it, you get through it. But let's go back to a few questions or statements. You can use my school's grand piano. I have access to grand pianos in my life. The issue with recording stuff is all the setup time and cameras and lights and all of these sorts of things. And as a one-person thing, it's kind of difficult. But it just in general, I want to have the ability to, set everything up, have it mic'd the right way, lit the correct way, camera angles correctly, and then never deal with it again. That's how I like to deal with things. Because with none of those things am I an expert. So I like to figure out what works, maybe ask a friend who knows more than me. And like with my lights in here, they don't move. They get turned on and off in different configurations sometimes. My microphone's above my tubas and euphoniums and stuff. Those don't move. The trombone mic, that doesn't move. And I can recall all the settings. And that's kind of how I like to do things because I'm not an expert. I can figure things out, but I'd rather have it be, really specific. So Brian asks, what albums have you worn out? I would say probably all the Marshall Jilks albums that I had, or all the Marshall Jilks CDs that I had prior to, well, I guess even in college. I guess his first 3 albums, those ones I've all worn out. Monin, the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers album. It's all car albums for me because it's like, when I got my first car, I just had a CD player and there were FM transmitters and things, but I didn't have one. Probably another one would be the Wynton Marsalis Standard Time Volume 1. That's one. There's a London Symphony album with Patrick Harold playing the Vaughan Williams. That's another one. The Oystein Bodsvik album, the 20th Century Tuba Concertos. That's another one. I'll let you tell yours.
I've got a couple that I think I kind of got stuck on a couple of albums like recently that have really, really been, if they were physical CDs, they would, I guess they'd probably still be fine, but if it was a record, I think we'd be pretty close to wearing them out. First one being,
Yeah, CDs don't last forever either, you know.
They don't. I know. I ruined many CDs in my Honda Civic growing up. But Shy Maestro's 2021 album, Human, with Philip Dizak on it. I've listened to that like belligerently ever since it came out. One that came out last year or the year before is Yawning Truman's Emotional Reality. Like the only trombone album that I've ever listened to like completely uninterrupted all the way through and then started again from the top. I was like, we're going again, second round. It's just absolutely outstanding. Joel Ross, Who Are You? 2020, or Who Are You? Yeah, Who Are You? And then Emmanuel Wilkins' Warriors album that came out this year. I've listened to that one just a ton. We've kind of exhausted that. And then there's one other one. Oh, the Walter Smith In Common albums, where he gets like a whole bunch of people and they do like a session all together, and like there's no like touring of it. It's just like this like one-off thing and it goes away. They did 2 of those and they're both amazing. But
Nice.
those have been the ones that I've been just like crushing recently. That's my, it's not driving music, it's jogging music.
Yeah.
Because it's like all like really cool like modern jazz is like interesting writing that always like just gets me like pumped, and I'm like, all right, it's exercise.
Yeah.
That's what I like right now.
So let's keep chugging through some of these comments. Do you think keys have different feelings? If so, what are your favorite keys and what feelings do you associate with those keys? It's a good question. There definitely has been studies into that. Not that I'm 100% aware of those, but probably a good another use for grand staff time. So, you know, one that comes up a lot is that D minor is the saddest key.
The saddest of all keys.
Which I don't know that I agree that it's that sad. It is one of my favorite keys to play in. I think because it's inherently helpful with the overtone series things on a trombone. It's harder to play wrong notes in the key of D minor, I think. Because if you play in first position or you play in second position, you should be able to argue those notes almost without fail. Which is a nice thing. But yeah, I mean, there's D major being like the most like triumphant key. You know, something like that. I don't know that I agree. I definitely think that they have feelings. I'm not a person who, you know, necessarily sees colors when I hear music, but they've got some feelings for sure. But I don't know that I can quantify those or give you a clear word always. Any other thoughts from you, Connor?
I have a counter argument. I don't think that I have any particular feelings for any keys. And I remember like thinking, like, I remember like hearing things about like, what is it called? Synesthesia. That's where people see colors. And
I was gonna
cool.
say that, but I was only 80% sure of my pronunciation. So
yeah, I don't even know if I'm correct either.
I think you're right.
I was like, oh, that's neat. Like I was like, I bet that's a total legit thing. And I remember hearing someone who was conducting a wind band I was in that was like, oh yeah, G flat. That's a really dark key. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, in reference to what? Like, what does that mean to be dark? And I feel like maybe like this was a tuba player that was conducting us in very like, you know, and I think maybe like it got me thinking about like maybe as instruments, like the instrument that you play that you have the most familiarity with might lean towards a bias of like what keys you think like sit really low fundamentally, and the instrument that you play that I think those are darker, you know. And then I got thinking even more like as an improviser, like I might elicit like play differently over different keys, and I've been taking that pretty seriously recently in my practicing. And what I think I have discovered completely anecdotally is that any change in the vocabulary or extemporaneous playing that's happening when I'm improvising based off of the key change is only because of a lack of familiarity or more familiarity with a key signature and just knowing more what to do with it. So I've been doing my recent routine this year has been Cherokee from the Burnin' Abersold 61 album, just going through the whole thing, just every day, just like do it once. And that's fun because that particular recording of Cherokee is a really, 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 really uncomfortable tempo. And by uncomfortable, I do not mean fast. I've played Cherokee a lot faster than that recording before, and that one is uncomfortable. It's like somewhere between like the beginning and the end. It's like riding like 265 to 280, which is just like the death zone. There's just nothing good happens in that tempo.
No, I either want to go fast,
right? It's like,
or I want to be able to do double time.
Right.
Like if I can't do double time, but it's not like super fast, and it doesn't work for me. Like,
right.
that no man's land of like not being able to play fast things. So it's like, I don't know. That's just definitely not my favorite. Yeah. We should answer a couple more questions and probably call it pretty soon here. Sure. What is your favorite trombone brand? Do you want to answer that? That's a question.
I thought it said trombone band, and I was going to say Four of a Kind because I've been listening to that trombone quartet album, and I was like, that's technically a band of only trombones, and it's slamming. And speaking of albums that we've been wearing out recently, that's a great one. Trombone brand?
There are a lot. You go ahead.
I'm quite partial to, I only own one of their horns, but I think Edwards is cool, but it's a difficult question to answer because so many trombone brands do so many different things so well. Yeah, that's a tough one.
I think, a lot there at the end of the day, at this point, there are so many trombone manufacturers that make a lot of really good trombones. Mm-hmm. And it's not like there's just, I feel like maybe 50 years ago, like before all the custom shops, when it was, at least in the United States, it was just like basically the Conn-Selmer company, but split into different companies. It's like when that was all you had. It's like those were the only real options. Holton, Conn, King, Bach, and those were all good. There were, Olds and Selmer also made some trombones. There were other good ones too, but you didn't have as many options. I feel like for me, it's so hard to tie it down to one brand because of doing different things. I think the people who do primarily one different thing, or one specific thing, like all they do is play, tour with big pop acts, or some people only do there are people who like only toured with Prince for 30 years. It's like, mm-hmm. I think you can have a favorite brand in those sorts of scenarios where you're doing one thing primarily. But even then, there are a lot of people who are, big name artists for, a company like Shires or something, and Shires trombones are great, and they play them 90% of the time, but then they play, vintage Conn every once in a while in the orchestra. There are all those sorts of things, because even if you're doing one sort of style of thing, especially with like an orchestra job, it's like you're playing maybe 2 or 3 pieces a week, especially for low brass, sometimes just one. And you could spend all week, doing all your fundamentals on this instrument, switch to this one this week. So I think sometimes I just don't think that I don't have a favorite. There are companies that make one thing really well. There are companies that make a couple of things. There are some that make almost everything pretty well. But at the end of the day, it's like, it'd be hard to go to just one brand, I think.
Yeah.
I can't think of one where I would never look back on anything. And another thing that's true about that too is like, like most professional trombonists that I know who play alto trombone play a German trombone. In the United States, most of them don't play German trombones for everything else, but when it comes to alto, they generally play a German instrument. So there are things like that where it's like, yeah, this is my day-to-day horn, but then when I need to do this thing, or, a company that maybe has slightly suspect valves on a large tenor or on a tenor without a valve, it's not that big of a deal. If you go to play bass and you have questionable valves, mm-hmm. you're going to have a bad time. That's not fun. So I think that's kind of part of it. So we'll answer this last couple questions. We'll try to, they keep coming in as we're talking. What advice would you have for someone looking to build a studio in a big city in Texas? Do you have a private studio in addition to teaching at schools? How did you get your foot in the door? That's a really tricky thing, specifically in the state of Texas, I think.
Yes.
Especially in the big cities, because pretty much, most of the bigger schools in bigger cities in the state have someone coming to the school to teach lessons.
Right.
And so it requires a student to have some combination of not liking the person that's teaching there, maybe wanting a quote unquote better teacher, maybe additional things. It's kind of tricky with that sort of thing. I've never taught a ton outside of institutions. What institutions I've taught at has changed over time. I never really taught at those music schools that are, independently, not have nothing to do with, either higher education or, a school necessarily. But, it's like I taught a lot of middle school and high school lessons, and currently I primarily teach college. Most of my teaching is college, other than some of the virtual students that I teach. So it's tricky, and all the ones that I've taught in Texas that haven't been through a school like that have kind of found me on some social media platform, which is partially why I've done these sorts of things and been concerned with them. It's because at some level people have to know where to find you. I don't think that just having a website is going to work. I mean, sometimes if you go play a performance, someone will come up to you and ask for lessons, but that's just you can only reach so many people in one spot with that. So that's kind of my best advice, is to make yourself be seen on the internet. I think that the all state videos that I've done have been helpful. I'm not the only person to have done those, and I think that it's hard for people to just reach out cold, but if they kind of have some level of what they feel like is a rapport with you, I think it'll be helpful. Do you have any thoughts, Connor?
No, you've kind of hit it on the head. Texas is a unique ecosystem where all of the schools pay for somebody to come in. So if you really were looking to teach a big studio in Texas, you will find that at a school. And if you want to build a studio that is outside of a school, I would recommend starting with a school job, and market yourself out as you will, and then that private studio will probably slowly come in, and maybe you can offload some of your workload eventually from the school if you don't want to keep doing that. But if your goal is just have a ton of students that you teach and to get a lot of work, all of the schools are paying for private lesson teachers. So
yeah, I think that they're wanting outside of that, which there are lots of reasons to want that. At this point in time, I'm not teaching at a middle school or a high school, and I maybe we'll do it in the future. It's not been terrible, but there are drawbacks, and I prefer teaching at home. If you can find the students to come to you, or virtually, or whatever the case may be. But I know a lot of people who've had success being at a school for a long time, and then when they decided to leave that school, if you do a good job, sometimes the parents will just want you to continue. So I think that could be a thing. So we're going to call... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, you probably won't sign a non-compete for your middle school band teaching job.
Yeah, I would imagine not. So last question. We're going to call it the last question. How to improvise for a beginner. I'll let you start with that at least.
So two really, really quick things. The first thing is, when I was 6 years old, I got a Pokemon How to Draw Pokemon book, and it changed my life because I learned how to draw all these cool Pokemon from direct, explicit instruction in the book. And then it was like one of those things, like you watch those like videos of like cells dividing rapidly in a brain, or and then it zooms out to a galaxy. I saw the Charmander on the page, had his mouth closed like this. And I was like, I want that mouth open, because I saw it on the TV open. And so I improvised and I changed the mouth. So with improvisation, if you're going to make your own original stuff, maybe find a melody you already know really well, like a Roshu or a solo, improvise a little tiny part of it, make your Charmander's mouth open. Once you can do that and you find music that you really enjoy, start working with letters instead of full sentences. So go to Willie Thomas's YouTube page, Jazz Everyone, look at all the pentatonic videos, learn the 10 tunes to know and blow. That's the shortest answer I can give to how to begin improvising.
I love the Charmander analogy. I think that's a great place to end. So we'll call it there for today. And as a reminder, we'll be on Monday starting next week. And that should be our normal time. But you know how this goes if you've been watching this for a while. We'll try to keep it that day, but sometimes it doesn't work. So we'll call it there, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week on Monday.
Bye, everybody.